At long last, after months of rumors, Nintendo has finally revealed The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Remake, Aka Remake of Time, copyrighted, trademarked. I thought of it first, you heard it here first. Revealed at the most recent Nintendo Direct on June 9th. And well, personally, this takes a backseat to the reveal that Kingdom Hearts 4 is still alive, at least for me. Ocarina being remade is a big deal, and while Nintendo's teaser was brief, not showing us really anything of substance, the surprise thing about this reveal is that the Aka remake will be out this year. Before I begin my main rant on remade games, I have to say I really do like the way Nintendo has been handling its announcements these days. The strategy of reveal The Elder Scrolls 6 8 years before it seems to be ready is so archaic compared to Nintendo's recent strategy of reveal big game 4 months before it comes out. I like it. Less speculative rage content before we get to the real rage content of actually playing the game. Anyways, Ocarina Remake, refocus. We've arrived at the most recent attempt to remake a monolith of the past. A game that, at the time of its release, was heralded as one of the greatest ever made and has managed to maintain that reputation even as it has aged. This won't even be the only time Nintendo does this in 2026, depending on when I get this episode out. We're days or a couple weeks away from another remake or reimagining, or however you're choosing to define it, of Star Fox 64. Another game that has maintained its status as a GOAT over the years. No Star Fox game since has managed to dethrone it in the zeitgeist as best Star Fox game, is basically what I'm saying. With Ocarina and Star Fox being the most recent addition to the absolute deluge of remakes we've been getting in the 2020s, it's raised a lot of questions, a lot of discussions, at least a lot of conversations with myself in my head while I sit at work and send emails and type in spreadsheets. Is it necessary to remake one of the most beloved games of all time? Is there true artistic reasons for this remake existing, or is Nintendo just trying to milk our nostalgia for more money? Can you recreate what made a video game experience special if it is removed from the context of the time period it was made in? Can you recapture that magic? Truthfully, I have no idea. At times, I've found myself on both sides of the remake debate, cheering on what I consider positive examples like the Crash and Spyro remake trilogies, and questioning the need and reason for something like The Last of Us remake. I've been an avid fan of the Resident Evil remakes, having never played the originals, while cringing and clenching at every rumor of a Final Fantasy IX remake. I don't really have a unified theory or opinion on the topic overall, as I've discovered, and I suspect that for a lot of people that will just come down to subjective preference. Some people might not care that games get remade and are just happy to experience the thing they love in a more modern setting, and that's perfectly fine. Others may bristle at the fact that a company is going back to the well to defile something beloved in order to poop out another modern interpretation of a beloved classic. I've been in both camps before. Just because something is the way it was in the past doesn't mean there isn't room for a modern interpretation of said thing in the present. In the same breath, just because something is old and quote-unquote outdated doesn't automatically make it inferior to something more modern. So I'm going to try my best to articulate some of my feelings on remakes and try really hard not to go down the rabbit hole tangent of nostalgia and companies selling it back to us for profit. Believe it or not, I've been thinking about this topic a lot, specifically in terms of storytelling. I know, right? Kingdom Hearts lore guy thinking of things in terms of narrative first and foremost. Who would have thought that was a possibility? And this line of thought really got started not with a video game, but with a movie, as everyone's probably well aware if you watch any amount of movies. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is set to absolutely come out and just conquer movie theaters and cinema conversation. And in a way, it's already attracted its fair share of, quote, controversy with casting decisions, costume design, the usual bad actors coming out of the woodwork to virtue signal that this is not the true Odyssey, as if they were there for a fictional event. I'm largely unbothered by this because at its core, the Odyssey is a myth. It's a legend. It's a story written down, passed down over thousands of years, told and retold over and over in different forms and different mediums. There's tons of different translations of the story that differ in their telling. Stories get told and retold over time, passed down over generations, and are told with their own interpretations. So it seems inevitable that this retelling of stories would find its way to video games, the most interactive medium that we have to date for conveying narrative and story. For all of the inevitable conversation around Ocarina and its greatness, it is at its core a story, and a very good one at that. The themes and lessons of Ocarina's narrative are timeless, like the game itself. A coming-of-age tale where a young boy leaves the safety of his ethereal forest realm and quickly discovers that the world is a much darker place than the life he experienced in his home. It is a coming-of-age tale that hits particularly hard no matter when you play it. As a kid who still retains a sense of childlike wonder and curiosity at the world around them, or as an adult who is cognizantly aware that the world is sort of always on fire in the background. A young Link is practically ripped from his childhood, saddled with the burden of a prophecy, and jettisoned into the future, dominated by Ganondorf's will. Ocarina's story perfectly captures the sometimes harsh realities of growing up and combines it with a message of hope. With the state of the world what it is today, it's honestly a story that's still just as relevant as it was in 1998, and maybe even more so. This thought alone initially put me on the side of an Ocarina remake, in the pro camp. Maybe this was a story that the younger generations needed to hear again, to be told again, and with the seeming dismissal and hostility of old games growing by the year, maybe this was the best way to do it. I went back and played Ocarina for the first time a couple years ago, and while I admit that it was by no means the smoothest experience, it's not an unplayable train wreck. But many people who grew up with more modern gaming experiences, if their childhoods were in the 2010s, might not have the patience for how rough around the edges Ocarina would feel compared to a modern Zelda experience, or even a modern adventure game experience. This could be the only way to pass on the legacy of Ocarina of Time to the next generation. And of course, I'm generalizing, there's plenty of younger people who have discovered the joy of the games that we loved growing up, but there's also a growing number of people dismissing the games that we hold up as the pinnacle of gaming as unk slop. That's another conversation, maybe for another time. I don't know if I'll ever utter the phrase unk slop ever again, so clip that and save it, put it in your folder. With the limited lifespan of physical media and uncertainty that surrounds digital ownership and preservation, a remake like this may be the only way to stretch the themes and legacy of Ocarina into the future. And listen, I know what you're thinking. This is an incredibly naive and positive outlook on video games. There's also the completely plausible argument that Nintendo's just continually going back to the nostalgia well to extract even more money from us. And that really is the main motivator for an Ocarina remake being made. I honestly wouldn't argue with you if that was your line of thinking, because at the end of the day, despite making beloved gaming experiences, Nintendo's goal is to make money. We've always had to square away our love of games with the sometimes greedy corporations that ultimately fund and make them. But with this narrative angle I've been thinking about, I've at least found one of the angles where I could get on board with an Ocarina remake. Bringing the story forward to 2026 and retelling it with a modern touch could be an interesting prospect. Let me be clear, this is in no way saying that Ocarina is too old and therefore unplayable, and that is the reason it should be remade. I've seen this argument make the rounds on social media, and to me it's dumb. Old does not equal bad, old does not equal unplayable, and that line of thinking is incredibly biased towards new gaming experiences. Saying we should remake it because it was on the N64 and N64 was bad is a bad faith argument because it dismisses and completely negates the context in which these games are made. And it was really through this angle that I found the flip side of this argument that Ocarina of Time shouldn't be remade. Regardless of how you feel about the N64, about Ocarina, and about Zelda in general, it is established within the zeitgeist still to this day that Ocarina is one of the greatest games ever made. It still remains a pillar of gaming, a litmus test against which other games are compared, and a massive influence for the people who are making games currently. I'm going to preface what I have to say next with this. Once again, I am not opposed to remakes. They are an objective reality in the industry and won't be going anywhere anytime soon. And even if I did, I'm not the type of person to yell about them until I'm blue in the face on the internet, even though I will make my fair share of jokes being like, oh, another remake. That being said, maybe there are certain things that are just too important to be remade. Something inside me says that there should be a line when it comes to remaking things that carry such a historical weight and importance to the medium, like Ocarina. I would say the same for something like Super Mario 64. Listen, I know we technically got 3D versions of both games on the 3DS, but what they're doing with Ocarina feels more substantial. But anyways, who would determine what that line is? What games qualify? Gaming is such a subjective medium that a lot of people would have different opinions about what things can be remade and what should remain untouched. I am very anti Kingdom Hearts 1 remake, as that's been something that's been rumbling in the community for a few years now. But I know I hold that game in higher regard than others. It's a game very much of its time. But that's just it, isn't it? It goes back to the context in which these games were made. Ocarina was developed during the cutting-edge transition from 2D to 3D, a transition that, which was very well documented, was very messy as developers learned in real time how to create games in 3D space. It was developed for the Nintendo 64 and is arguably one of the best games on that console. The question of remaking Ocarina comes down to if you think that Ocarina was a product of the environment in which it was originally made and released, or if you think that the context in which that game was made doesn't matter and that it is possible to recapture the essence of what makes Ocarina what it is by remaking it within a brand new context. Talk about a word salad, but I think I got the point across. And then, since we are getting an Ocarina remake, do any departures from the original game or quality of life improvements no longer make that a faithful Ocarina remake and something else entirely? Ugh, man, this is a whole can of worms. I can't stop taking these tangent paths that really take me to a place that forces me to try and define philosophically what a remake is at its core. I don't know. Running back an old feeling I had from my Pokemon Legends ZA episode, I guess you could say there are two wolves inside me. At this point, there's going to be a whole pack of wolves in there at the rate we're going. Just ban me from using the wolf metaphor anymore at this point. I swear to God. One wolf is the understanding why this remake exists in terms of retelling the story of Ocarina for a new generation, and Nintendo trying to cash in on our nostalgia. The other is kind of opposed to it because it feels like a title so monumental, so important to the medium like Ocarina, it shouldn't be touched. It exists in the time it was made, in the context in which it was made, and that ultimately is its legacy that has had a profound impact on everyone who makes and plays video games. Maybe that's old man syndrome setting in. Old video game player yells at clouds while shaking fists, these damn kids in their fancy Ocarina remake. I don't know. My gut tells me that Ocarina is not a grave that we should be defiling to cash in on nostalgia. It means too much, even to a casual Zelda fan like myself. And in case you're wondering, I feel the exact same way about the heavily rumored Chrono Trigger remake. I played Chrono Trigger last year. It's an incredibly modern 30-year-old RPG that I feel has aged incredibly well. It still looks great, it's easy to play, it's relatively brisk compared to other RPGs in its field. It's the perfect representation of RPGs at that time, the culmination of all of Square and Enix's prowess in the genre up until that point. And in my opinion, Chrono Trigger cannot faithfully be remade. Akira Toriyama is gone, and I'm 100% certain that Hironobu Sakaguchi would not be involved. So much of Chrono Trigger's identity is because of that dream team, the collaboration of Toriyama, Sakaguchi, and Yuji Horii. That's the context in which it was made, and that is now impossible to recreate those conditions. The collaboration of Toriyama, Sakaguchi, and Yuji Horii, that's the context in which Chrono Trigger was made, and it is now impossible to recreate those conditions. These were three creators at the absolute peak of their popularity, peak of their power, overseeing some of the most popular stories being told at the time, and they came together to make something incredible. You could remake Chrono Trigger pixel by pixel, screen by screen, and in my mind, it would never be the same. In my opinion, that game is in the untouchable category, but that's purely my opinion, and it's subjective to the way I view and interact with games. One game I don't take an issue with in this debate is Final Fantasy VII, because I don't really view the remake trilogy as a quote remake in the pure definition of the word. A faithful remake of FF7 would be one game, turn-based. It would be more in line with the original story. The remake trilogy story is more of a retelling. Like, honestly, calling it Final Fantasy VII Retold might be a better name for that trilogy, and it would kind of shed some of the negative connotations of calling it Final Fantasy VII Remake. Also, Square has already gone back to the FF7 well so many times with the compilation of FF7. Like, there's a dozen games in the Final Fantasy VII series. It's honestly not surprising that the remake trilogy is shaping up to be what it is, but maybe that's a topic or video for another time. Revelation's coming out sometime next year, and I'll play it, and maybe I'll finally put together my thoughts on that whole project. I don't know. Anyways, I think everybody on some level will have a different opinion on what is and isn't acceptable when it comes to remakes. Some people are ecstatic for an Ocarina remake, others are more reserved, and that's fine. We're all human beings and all have unique feelings on why we feel the way we do about certain things. One thing I do know for certain is that by choosing an Ocarina remake, Nintendo is set to release this game under the most intense scrutiny a game can possibly be released under. The original is so beloved that every moment, every frame of it will be compared to Ocarina 64 for proof of authenticity. I'm not a game maker, but I feel like the pressure to at least live up to the original has to be immense. But despite all that, Ocarina will come out, remakes will continue to be made, and Nintendo will continue to Nintendo, and that's something you can be absolutely sure of.